everybody. This is Alan Peterson with Meet the Thriller Author. And for this podcast, I have Kevin Tumlinson, who has a lot of books out there. He's written science fiction and nonfiction, and now he's writing thrillers. So I'm excited to have him on the show. How are you doing, Jeff? Kevin, sorry.
I'm good. If it makes you feel better, call me Jeff. I'm fine with it.
Jeff, how are you, Alan? Yeah, I'm doing good. Good thing I can edit this.
No, you never. Okay, we just had this discussion about me being on like 1,000 podcasts, and one thing I've learned is that listeners love hearing the goofs and glitches. So you could probably just leave that in, and you'll be just fine.
All right. So you don't seem to be offended, so that's good. I'm glad. I'm embarrassed, but okay, I'll leave it in.
No problem at all.
All right. So for our listeners who aren't familiar with you or your books, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Okay, so I've been a writer all my life and an author probably since around 2008. Actually, technically, I always tell people I wrote my first book when I was 5 years old, which is not a lie. It was a handwritten affair on notebook paper, and I was quite proud of it. But these days, I write using my MacBook Air, and I tend to write a lot more words. But the gist of my career at this point is that I am a full-time author. Although I do some side gigs and do a little copywriting work still. But I'm a full-time author. My wife and I are about to hop in an RV and travel full-time while I write books. It's a very serious affair for me. And then the whole thriller aspect of my writing happened recently. And it's a great story. I'm sure we'll get into it, but that's become something of a passion for me. So I consider myself at this point to be a thriller author and speculative fiction dabbler at this point.
Oh, okay. So is the Coelho Medallion, is that your first thriller book then?
Okay, so technically it is my first full-fledged thriller, and here's what I've learned. I did not realize this was the way the name was pronounced, but I was told it's pronounced Coelho, so Coelho Medallion, but fear not, I was mispronouncing it for like a year. But yes, so the way this started, I've written some things that could technically fall into the thriller category. My book Evergreen was more or less a thriller. It had some supernatural elements to it, but that it made it, there are a lot of thrillers out there that have those aspects I've discovered since then. But the story behind Coelho Medallion was I have a friend and writing partner and business partner named Nick Thacker, who is a thriller author. That's his full-time gig. Well, he works, but that's the books that he writes are all thrillers. And he loves what I write. And he's always kind of teased me. He basically dared me to write a full-on thriller. So I took the dare. I wrote the book. I kind of went into it saying, I'm not going to like this. There's no spaceships. There's no aliens. There's no one has superpowers. But I wrote this first thriller, and he read it. He loved it. I put it out to my list. My mailing list. They loved it, and suddenly I'm getting. This is like my best-selling book of all time. It's made me more money than any other book.
Oh, that's awesome.
Suddenly I'm like, well, there may be something to this. So on a dare, basically, I switched genres and became a thriller author. And I've written some short fiction that ties in with that book, but I've got a full-on. I don't know. I don't like calling it a sequel because it's not really that type of series. It's not a serialized story. But it's a follow-up to that book, and then I'll probably write several more in that vein.
So like with the same characters? Is it like
yeah.
They're like standalones, but it's the same characters in the same world? Okay.
Yeah, kind of like, it's a lot like the Jack Reacher novels, whereas my character's he's not a tough-as-nails, hard-ass ex-military guy, but I mean, he's a super wealthy, he's kind of, he's very intelligent, multiple PhDs kind of guy, so he's the intellectual Jack Reacher, we'll say.
Right. And so that's interesting. And so you say you're going to be writing them on an RV? Is that your future ones are going to be written on an RV?
Oh yeah. So the short version of that story is, let's see, I think about a year ago now, my wife comes into my office in our home. We owned a fairly large house, and I had a studio and I had my office, and she comes in and she says, "Hey, you remember when you were talking about this dream you had of selling the house and buying an RV and traveling full time?" And I said, "I vaguely remember this that I talk about every day." And she says, "Well, why don't we do it?" And so after I pick myself up off the floor. We put the house on the market and we sold it, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment for a while. And come October, now we've already purchased an RV. We purchased one about 2 months ago. We've already taken some pretty good trips in it. But come October, we're downsizing into that RV full time. And the idea here is to drive around the country and find places that appeal to us, and I'll sit and write books for a month or two, and then move on to the next place. Kind of a roving book tour / mobile inspiration kind of thing.
Wow, that's awesome. Hey, if you make it to San Francisco, you gotta let me know.
Absolutely, man. And that's definitely one of the ones who we have some friends that live in San Francisco, and in the Bay Area there, and we definitely want to get up into that region. The only problem for me personally about heading to your side of the country is there's first of all there's a mountain range in between us, but then there's a desert. And the desert is really the thing that makes me nervous. We barely got. The RV we got is great, but it's gas powered, so it doesn't handle like really steep inclines very well. So there was a moment of fear when we were in Colorado recently that we weren't going to make it. And so I thought, well, that was bad enough, but I can't imagine taking this thing across, a few hundred miles of, scorching hot desert with nothing but, nothing around,
Yeah,
so,
you'd be challenged here too then with the steep hills here.
Yeah, although it does hills okay. The steeper they are, the worse it is. But whatever. I mean, we'll park somewhere nice then and just rent a car. We'll just do that.
Yeah. So now you said so you started writing thrillers as a challenge. Your friend threw down at you. But were you a fan of the genre before? Like, did you read thrillers before you started writing them?
Yes. What's funny is I read a ton of thrillers without actually realizing they were thrillers for the longest time. Now, when I decided I was going to write in this genre, what I did was go out and find the top 3 or 4 authors in the genre and read a bunch of their books. But before that, I mean, I never even really thought about it. But like, Dan Brown's books and Stieg Larsson, the whole like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that series, I devoured all those early on, and a bunch of David Baldacci's books, and I had already read a great deal of these without ever quite realizing what it was I was reading. So, so I and I was a big fan of the movie genre as well, because who wouldn't like? Well, for example, National Treasure. Who wouldn't like that movie? I mean, who wouldn't like that scenario? And so, those elements have stuck with me, but. Afterward, I mean, I started reading like Robert Ludlum and a bunch of other thriller authors that I discovered sort of after the fact, and that's been a big influence on me recently. I mean, it's opened my eyes to the sort of thing that can be done that I wasn't really thinking about. James Rollins is another good example. Like I'm just devouring those books now because they're interesting. What's fascinating to me, though, coming to this genre was an awakening for me because if you read any of my fiction, and I've told people this for years, but now I actually have something else I can point to. But you could read any of my books, and the characters are what matter. Right? Mm-hmm. So you could take the characters from, say, my Citadel series, which is all science fiction, and transplant them to modern-day America and give them a slightly different scenario, or keep essentially the same scenario, and the story wouldn't really change. I mean, other than the fact that there's an alien in it, I mean, it's the same kind of book I write now. Yeah. The setting is just what determines that it's science fiction.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. The genres are really changing then. And there's so many subgenres now that it's just kind of hard. So, yeah, like when I say thriller, basically it's like mystery, suspense. I mean, it's a huge... Well,
it is a pretty broad genre, I will say. I read a lot of books, like A.G. Riddle's whole Atlantis Gene series. Those books were thrillers, but they're really science fiction. And I started looking like, well, okay, Michael Crichton, I think he's technically a thriller author, right? But I mean, everything he wrote was science fiction, and he's got books about time travel. There's nothing that is more firmly entrenched in the staples of science fiction than time travel, right? cloning dinosaurs. You know, these are all science fiction concepts, but he wasn't really known as a science fiction author. You know.
Yeah, yeah, because dinosaurs then start chasing and eating everybody. Then it gets to a thriller.
Yeah, now it's in thriller. Yeah, now you've got Malcolm, you know, running from dinosaurs and having to use his brain to survive or whatever.
Yeah.
And somehow surviving the first book. You know, I won't get into that. I don't know. I always have this contention because, you know, he died in the first book. At least it looked like he died. So.
Oh wow! Yeah. See, I never even read the first book. Though.
You need to read it.
Yeah. A lot of people point to that book too as being a kind of an inspiration for them. So yeah, I have to read it.
Yeah, and that's also what I mean when you know, because obviously I read Jurassic Park, for example. I mean, I read that in reaction to the film, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I'd read a ton of books. You know, that's got me on a whole Michael Crichton phase. And then I read books that were sort of like Michael Crichton, and you know, before you know it, I've read a ton of books that I never even knew were thrillers. And it is a malleable genre, I think, because you do have, you know, this sort of hard spy tech type thrillers next to, you know, here's a virus that's going to wipe out humanity, and then here's an alien life form that is running amok in, you know, modern day America, and these guys are going to hunt him down. I mean, you have that sort of range in the thriller genre, and once I realized that, it keyed me into a couple of things that I really enjoy about writing, and that is, all right, I have always enjoyed stories that were set in the contemporary world. When I read fiction, even when I read like comic books and that sort of thing, the stories that I always liked most were the everyday stories that surround these extraordinary people. You know, some of my favorite issues of X-Men, you know, were like the Christmas issues where, you know, Wolverine and gang are going Christmas shopping, you know. Yeah. You know, it's just dumb, but it's like this idea of having a contemporary world where there's something extraordinary happens has always appealed to me. I like books like Stephen Gould's Jumper. My book Evergreen I always kind of consider that to be a spiritual cousin of Jumper because it's, you know, the same general idea of a protagonist with an extraordinary ability in the contemporary world. And thrillers actually offer an opportunity to take that sort of idea and sort of go broader with it and start showing some like global implications and, you know, how would this affect the world if suddenly we discovered that, you know, aliens really did crash land in Roswell in the 40s, or, you know, there is a virus that's getting out of hand and wiping out, you know, an entire state or something, you know. Those ideas are intriguing, and I like following that. And the fact that it's set in a contemporary setting means that I don't have to invent the whole world. I can do the extraordinary stuff on a micro scale and then show the result of it on the macro.
Yeah, that is it is an incredible genre. That's one of my favorite genres as a reader too, because yeah, like you said, you can go contemporary, you can go to the historical. You know, yeah. If you get tired of reading Michael Connelly and Bosch, you can read Harry Hole. It's kind of like a Norwegian version of Bosch.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a cool genre.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think these authors, by the way, are the guys that I admire. When you read, like, you know, I'm trying to think. Well, I can't remember. For some reason, his name has just dropped right on my brain. The guy who writes the Jack Reacher books. What's his name?
Oh, Lee Child.
Lee Child. Yeah. Thank you. His name just bounced right out of my head. Because there's also Lincoln Child. And there's all, you know. It's like, guys, what? But you know, Lee Child. You watch interviews with that guy, right? And he's like, yeah, I don't exercise. You know, basically, I live on a steady diet of cigarettes and coffee and scotch, and you know, I'm like, these are the guys. When people thought about writers, anytime throughout the past like 30, 40, 50 years, it's guys like Lee Child that they were thinking about. You know, the sort of modern day Hemingway who, you know, is probably going to die young, but he's going to leave behind a legacy. You know, so there's something kind of cool about being a part of that group. I was always, you know, you look at my branding. Okay, honestly, I'm a quirky guy. I occasionally wear a bow tie. I make a lot of jokes about having no pants on. I go for funny. But there's that part of me that always wanted to be sort of, rough and tumble, like, I'm as rough as my characters,
Yeah. Yeah. And Lee Child's a good. I just read an article how he just sits down and starts to write. This guy
Yeah.
has no idea. What's your
Yeah, that's
style?
me.
Yeah, do you pants or do you like
Oh,
do
yeah.
very? Oh, okay. How does that work for
And
you?
I call this basically my irony style because I do a lot of jokes about being pantsless. It's kind of part of my brand now. Um, but I'm a complete pantser when I sit down to write. I don't have a clue what that story's going to be when I start typing. And I don't handwrite anymore. I used to longhand stories, but because that's what I was told real writers do. But that's what's known as BS, by the way. Real writers write, and it doesn't matter how they write. But I sit down and I maybe have a general idea. The book I'm working on now, it's called The Atlantis Riddle, and it is another Dan Kotler book. It's a sequel to Quello Medallion. It picks up essentially where the events of Quello Medallion left off a few months after, and you see some fallout from it. And one of the things that I enjoy is I tie all my work together. There is always something in one of my books, a little Easter egg that ties it to every single other book, and it might be subtle. There's an instance in Quello Medallion that ties it to Evergreen, and therefore they're all in the same universe.
Oh,
right?
cool.
So that's just
Even though the different genres and everything.
right.
Awesome.
Yeah. And the way I did that is I cheated. I wrote a fantasy series I need to finish out now, the Sawyer Jackson series. It's kind of a YA fantasy series, but the story has this idea of an omniverse. So because these guys can move around from universe to universe, everything that I write is part of that omniverse. So I cheat. I created my own universe.
Yeah, awesome.
So I kind of stole that idea, I'll be honest with you, from Stephen King, because that's essentially what he does with his Gunslinger books, the Dark Tower stuff.
Oh, okay. I haven't read those. Yeah.
Those are amazing. And if you I don't know what genre the Gunslinger stuff falls into, the whole Dark Tower series or whatever, but I mean, it's not horror, it's fantasy, I guess. But if you are a fan of Stephen King at all, you should read those because he does this something very similar. Like he'll tie them all together. But but your question was about my style, and I completely pants it. And what I've discovered with thrillers that's a little different from the rest of my fiction is because I generally have 3 or 4 different plot lines running at the same time, I have to keep more notes as I write. So I don't outline before, but I essentially outline during.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to kind of keep things straight. And I like to use this method I learned from writing for comics, the DC writing for comics, whatever that, I can't remember the title, so I'm flubbing that. But there's this paradigm that they use for keeping track of multiple plots in an ongoing story, and I use a very similar version of that paradigm, which is to say I introduce plot A, and then I introduce B and C, and then I'll resolve plot A at some point, and then B and C, B becomes A, and then everything shifts, and then I'll keep going. Well, the advantage of that is that when I get to the next book, I might still have a thread or two from the previous book that I can just pick up and run with. And in the case of Atlantis Riddle and Quello Medallion, I mean, there are characters who appeared in the first book who are really just supporting characters who got into trouble or whatever in some way. They were injured or something, and then you kind of see their fates play out in the next book. And 1 or 2 of those won't be resolved until, say, 3 or 4 books from now. So I do that because it's interesting to me. It's a nice little balancing act, but it also makes my world feel more real. It makes my characters have more depth because, in the real world, we don't just meet someone and interact with them. If you find yourself in a fierce gun battle with 2 or 3 strangers, those strangers are your friends for life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we don't just forget them and move on. So
Yeah.
I like to lace my stuff with that.
Yeah, that is a good point. That's something like with a Jack Reacher. Like every book, all these people, and then you can never hear from them again.
Right. And it all starts fresh. I mean, And I know why, because I mean it's difficult. And Lee Child, I mean I've heard an interview with him where he said, because he got into this, he and I actually have similar backgrounds. We both worked in television. We both left television and ended up writing because that just seemed natural. But you know, when he got started, he wanted to create. He felt so completely disenfranchised and powerless over the circumstances leading to his departure from TV, that he wanted to create a character that could just own everything. You know, just walk into a room and he's the baddest badass in the room. And you know, so you know, he created his ultimate, I guess, id. You know, I mean, this is who he wants to be. So you know, thinking about that, you realize that this is a nice outlet for all these things you want to accomplish now. But for him, he ends the story, and then the only thing left is Jack Reacher. So in terms of, say, a Star Trek episode, you know, like these old ship in a bottle episodes where everything happens on one set, he's the ship in the bottle. You know, Jack Reacher is the set. You know, everything else happens as a vehicle for Jack Reacher. Yeah. And I was never comfortable with that idea. I mean, I want my character to live in a world that the reader might recognize as their own, at least in part. And I want them to grow attached to characters and wonder about them, and then have that paid off at some point.
Yeah, you can grow. Your characters can grow then too.
Right. Because they may become a major character. In Coelho Medallion, I introduced her name is Dr. Evelyn Herelica, and she is basically kidnapped. She's a kidnap victim, and that was going to be her role. That was it. You know, I wasn't going to flesh her out any more than that. She was just going to be sort of a motive for some of the characters. And first of all, I don't think that's entirely right to do. I don't think it's right to introduce characters simply so that they can be murdered, killed. Murdered and killed happen to be the same thing, but you know, murdered and kidnapped, or you know, severely beaten or whatever, and that's the hero's motive for going forward. I think that's sort of, you know, untrue. That's sort of disloyal to both the characters and to the reader. I want to introduce characters who have more depth than that. They're not throwaway characters. They have lives, and they go on and exist even off the page. So that's the kind of writer that I am, though. I'm definitely a character author. I mean, that's what I'm writing is that character story. I'm not writing about, you know, Viking villages and you know, medallions and lost cities and all that stuff. That stuff is just, you know, there for the character, to show the character's depth and their abilities.
So as you're writing, you start thinking, oh, I can see her having a bigger role, or I can see her having a bigger role in in the next novel. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they'll tell me. I mean, it's crazy the way that happens. A character that I introduced as, I'll tell you the perfect example of this, and I'll pull it right from Coelho Medallion. There's the character of Roland Denzel, who was not actually named specifically for my friend and fellow author Roland Denzel. I had the character name before I met the guy, but later I decided, hey, here's your homage. But Roland Denzel is an FBI agent who literally his job in the first draft of the first few chapters, at least, of the book was he was an FBI escort for Dan Kotler to get him from point A to point B, and that was going to be the only job he had. And I mean, literally, that was it. I wrote the scene, and I thought, okay, this guy and his partner, they'll vanish now. their job is done. And then my character, Dan Kotler, says in a scene when he's been approached by the director of the FBI, can I request someone to go with me? And he asks for Roland Denzel. I had no idea that was coming. And now that guy is in the sequel. He plays as big a role in the sequel as he did in the first book. So he's a major character in this series now. Now, whether he continues on, I can't say. I don't know for sure. But you know, in this book at least, he's a major player in the second book.
And where do you get your ideas for your books?
Well, I steal them from Stephen King. Um, but no, so that's the uniform question, right?
Yep.
Every author gets asked that question,
Yep.
and no author has a very good answer. And my answer isn't going to be any better. But I mean, the ideas mostly come to me as I'm experiencing something else, which is one of the reasons why we want to get on the road full time for a while, so that I can experience as many different things as possible. But the idea for Quello Medallion was, let's just say it started with a whole bunch of starts that I had written, a bunch of opening scenes that I had written years ago before I'd published, that I thought, well, I'll keep these because I didn't have the discipline to sit down and write the books, so I'll keep these bits and pieces. Maybe I'll use them again someday. When I was dared to write this book, I thought, well, here's an opportunity. I always said I'll use those. Let me see if I can work them into the book, and I did. But I needed a MacGuffin. I needed something for everyone to care about, and so I came up with this idea of this medallion. And then I thought, well, the medallion, it's boring. Everyone's done something Aztec. What would be shocking? And I had been reading about and watching like Discovery Channel shows and History Channel shows about Vikings in America. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be pretty awesome if there was this, something that connected Vikings to ancient American cultures, in a way that we never expected. And so all these bits and pieces were kind of tumbling together when I got the dare. And my challenge was, take these pieces. It's like someone dumping a bucket of Legos parts in front of you and saying, build something, Take these pieces and making something meaningful out of them. And I did. And there's at least one scene in that book, in the opening, in the prologue, that I think people have pointed this out, and I think rightly so. I think it's weak. I think the book could have been stronger, at least, without it. But it was one of those pieces that I had kind of kept from the beginning. So I think I made a mistake in keeping that scene, but if not for that scene, one of the biggest elements of the story that I always thought was so cool wouldn't have existed. And so I introduced the idea in this scene that I probably could have done away with. I didn't need to introduce it, but I would never have thought of it if I hadn't introduced it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, basically, I guess in that case, I stole all my ideas from me.
For your self-conscious, right?
Yeah, over years.
Yeah.
But they come from everywhere. I mean, you as an author, we are filters. I mean, we're shapers in that we get the bits and pieces, we get the clay, we get the components, and we build from it. We're crafters, we're makers. Which is something I've always been. Even when I wasn't writing, I was always tinkering and building things, and I was always very good at repurposing things, coming up with new ideas for old stuff. And that's essentially what I do now. I read a lot. I read a lot of biographies, a lot of articles, I read science journals. I'm one of the only people I know who literally actually reads science journals. Most people kind of claim they do, and then they read like an excerpt, or they read something on Facebook. I read, old magazines. I love combing through like archives of old newspapers and magazines, and you'd be amazed at the stories that come out of that. I mean, just incredible things that are essentially lost to time, and then I synthesize all that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to find a science journal.
Oh man, you can find them there. So Google actually has a service specifically for journals, and I forget the name of it. I've got a big bookmarked. But I also, for a time, was subscribing to them, and then I stopped subscribing and just started picking them up like the library. Or I have friends who are scientists and engineers, so they'll drop things off for me. So we can get them anywhere. Go to the library.
So, are there any similarities between you and your main characters? Like, does any parts of you make it into your books?
I mean, I essentially, I think good authors are also essentially actors. Mm-hmm. They may not have the skill and craft of acting, but I mean, it's a similar function. And so I think there are always components of me in every character I write, particularly with their sense of humor. Every time I write a character that has a wry sense of humor, I'm pretty much just channeling me. Like I'm telling the jokes I would tell in that scenario. Basically, what's great about writing is I can set up my own jokes. You know, like I can create the scenario that will allow me to tell the joke I want to tell. But yeah, I think ultimately there's a small component of me in every character, which is a little frightening if you think about it, because I write bad guys too. You know, I mean, I write people who do horrible, horrible things, and I think that's that dark spot in your soul that we don't like to look at. But then I go and conquer that on the page with the good guys, and so it all balances out.
Tapping the good and the bad inside of us.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, where do you usually write? I mean, I know you're going to be hitting on an RV. How about now? Like, where do you usually write?
So, things have gotten kind of hinky since we got the RV, because what we did, I had a vehicle and I traded the vehicle and some other stuff and some money so that we could get the RV. And the RV is parked primarily at a storage right now. So I'm more or less confined to wherever I can walk or bike to at the moment. Luckily, there is a Starbucks just a few blocks away, so I write there a lot. Some of my favorite places to write are hotel lobbies, especially like vintage hotels. I love, of course, any coffee shops and cafes. That's fine. I love going to Barnes & Noble because after I'm kind of done writing, I can go cruise the aisles and, I get ideas from book covers. Mm-hmm. It's weird. It's just I didn't mention that earlier, but I mean, one of my sources of ideas is to look at someone else's book cover and imagine what the story could be and then go write that story.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, places like that. And at home, I write at home quite frequently, and we've got this huge wooden dining table wedged into a small breakfast nook area, but it's like the kind of table you would see in like old libraries, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's just something about sitting at a table like this, my laptop, maybe I've got a notebook and a pen to the side if I want to jot something down or whatever, but it's a very vintage feeling space, and it's just for me. Like it's part of our living space, and we'll use it for dinner or whatever occasionally, though we usually just eat on our laps watching TV. But this is solid space for me. So as long as I've got kind of a window to look out of and a nice hard table in front of me, I'm usually pretty good. The RV offers these things, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sort of picturing you sitting at this big wooden table, like all regal.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's. Other than I dress like a slouch most of the time. It is kind of like that. But once we're in the RV, it's now we've got a crappy little table I plan to replace, and my wife is kind of rolling her eyes about it. But the goal there also is, right now I live in the Houston, Texas area, and it's just hot as hell all the time, and high humidity all the time. And so I don't go outside to write very frequently because I'm spoiled to air conditioning. But when we've traveled and we've been in Colorado and other places that tend to remain dry and cool, then I love getting out, setting up a table or getting on a picnic table or something and writing with nature around me. Like, that's just awesome. Like, that's just a goal of mine, is to sit with a lake and some mountains and a bunch of trees around me, with my RV behind me, and go do the work. That's my goal. That's a dream.
Yeah, I can see that could be like a good series too, like kind of like a Jack Reacher type, but he's in an RV going around. So
it's funny you say that, because I actually have a small serialized set of stories called Think Tank, in which the main character is we'll call him a displaced billionaire for now, who buys an RV and goes around solving the world's problems with his team of experts.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
They're not really thrillers, I guess, or maybe they are. I now that I've got a whole new respect for thrillers, I need to re-examine them, because they may technically fall under the thriller category.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you encounter when you're writing your fiction?
So I've got the everyday challenges every author has, like, constant interruptions from life, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't have like writer's block or anything. I've never had writer's block. I think for me, the bigger challenges are things like every writer hits what they call the muddy middle, where you get to a certain point in the story and you're kind of like, what the heck do I do now? And I don't consider that writer's block. What I do at that point is go back and start from the beginning. I start reading and editing and telling myself the story again. And then by the time I get to the muddy middle, I've got momentum again, and I jump right back in and start writing. But I've got the everyday challenges. There's nothing, there's nothing that hits me, every now and then or every day even that anyone else doesn't have to deal with.
And so you write every day?
I write every day. Yeah. I have a word target.
Okay, so I was going to ask you. Yeah, word target.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know different things work for different authors, and for the authors listening, I mean, I always hesitate to say what I'm about to say because people tend to weigh themselves against others. But I mean, I have a word target of 5,000 words a day, and I hit it every day.
Oh wow.
The thing is, some writers can't do that. Some writers can do more than that. But I think that what's important is to have something like, I'm disciplined, I guess. Not I guess. You need a discipline.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, so you need to either say, I'm going to write X words per day, or I'm going to write for X amount of time per day. And then you do that every day. And, for me, if I don't hit 5,000 words in the morning in my prime writing time and life takes over and I got to do other stuff, I'm not a night person. I'm a morning person. But if 9 o'clock rolls around, 10 o'clock rolls around, and I haven't finished my 5,000 words, I got to sit down and finish them. Mm-hmm. And that's the discipline. Feels like punishment at that point. But I mean, those words, by the way, can often be complete crap at 10 o'clock at night. But they are, that's 5,000 words. I mean, that's the goal. But if your goal is to write, an hour or 2 hours a day, then make sure that you're getting that total time. Even if it's 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, just make sure you're hitting the goal every day.
And so what keeps you going to continue writing?
I cannot imagine my life without the writing. Like I just would not have a life. It's such a part of me and it's such a passion for me. I've done it all my life. I do it, and that's thunder, by the way. That's not my stomach growling or anything. Oh. But I do, I can't imagine a life other than what I have. I can't imagine doing anything else in my life if it took me away from the writing. But what comes, there are tough days. Everyone faces them. And, I mean, coming back for me is a matter of, the readers help a lot. Like, I've got readers who write and tell me how much they love the work, how much they appreciate that I talk to them, because I respond to every email I get. I send out a bunch of free stuff all the time. People on my mailing list, I've probably given away more books than I've ever sold.
Yeah, I see that you're giving like a starter library on your website to have that link on for the listeners.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kevintumlinson.com/starter library, and you can get three of my best books for free.
Wow.
And I am actually going to retool that at some point so that people are getting thrillers. Right now, it's science. There's a science fiction book, there's a fantasy book, and then there's another science fiction book, it's a novella, and all of which people love. And I love giving them out. And they're series starters. I mean, they get you into my work and encourage you to keep reading, and so that's part of why they're there. But I give away copies of books all the time to people. An odd thing about my mailing list, a lot of my readers are older, retired people who have fixed incomes. So, I'll have people contact me and say, I'd really love to read your new book, but, for example, this collection I just released, it's like $10. I'd really love to read your new book, but, I don't have the budget to spend $10 on a book. Well, understandable. I mean, I've been known to spend thousands of dollars on books at a time, but I understand. It's everyone's got their limitations, and 9 times out of 10 I'll give them that book, and say, if you don't mind, if you like it, go review it, because we need reviews as much as we need cash, really.
Yep.
I've never once regretted doing that. Not like I've never thought, oh, there's a sale I didn't get, and there were lots of times where I could have used at least one sale. So.
Yeah, so you also interact a lot with the writing community too. I noticed you have books helping authors
Yeah.
wannabe authors.
Will be authors.
Will be
That's what I
authors.
call it.
Okay, well, I like that. That's good.
That's the
Positive.
phrase I
Yeah.
like to use. Yeah. So it's because I have this philosophy that everyone. I know there are different levels of skill. Okay, but if I can write a book on notebook paper at 5 years old, you can write a book. And so I wrote a book. I wrote a 30-day author, and it's all about developing a daily writing habit. That's really all it's about. I give a formula for writing books, the same formula I use now. And in my daily writing, I don't, my goal was never to make that like an empire, a nonfiction empire or anything. I'm probably going to write some expansions to it at some point. But yeah, I consider myself a very big advocate for the indie publishing industry. Mm-hmm. I've got 5 podcasts of my own. I've got that nonfiction book. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I just connected with a company. I can't make the full announcement just yet, but I mean, I just connected with a company that's very involved in the indie publishing industry, and I'm helping to build resources for authors. I guess because of the way I came in, I mean, I started with a traditional contract. I can do basic math, so I figured out pretty quickly that I was going to lose money. I paid back the advance that I got, lost the rights to my book for 4 years, and then when I kind of heard stirrings about things like Kindle and CreateSpace and these sorts of things, I went all in and embraced that, and then learned as much as I could, and then I connect with indie authors and publishers all the time now, and I get around. I mean, I've done practically every podcast there is, and most of which I own apparently, or I'm a part owner. I think the reason that I am so on fire for that industry is because of how awesome everyone in the industry is to each other. Like everyone gives all the time. If someone discovers a new method for marketing their work, 10 seconds later, every author they've ever met in their life is hearing the story. And a new service comes out that's going to be helpful to authors. They push everyone into that service. We got to support these guys. We got to get out there and build something new that helps authors. And there are people who take advantage of that. I mean, there are people who create things that specifically to milk money from this industry. And what can you say? That's every business.
Yeah.
That's every industry. I mean, but I'm a big proponent of the indie publisher industry.
Yeah, that is true. It is very, people help each other out, even in this, same genres or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just
doesn't matter.
Nice to see that.
There's no such thing as competition in this. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's the biggest thing. When the big 5 do their whole, puff their chest up and crow about how the ebook is on the decline, and I'm like, are you crazy? Like it's puffery. I mean, it's just BS. And it makes me very angry because I'm looking around and saying, well, I literally read an article a few months ago that literally stated that there are only a handful, like less than 100 people who are making their living on indie publishing. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's like 10,000 people in this Facebook group that are all making their living on indie publishing, so I'm not sure where that number comes from,
Yeah. You can slice the data and make things look
any
however
way you
want
want.
it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, they set up a zero-sum game. The way they play it, it's either traditional publishing, and that means print books only, because they don't really believe in ebooks, or you're on the losing team, quote unquote, by going the indie route. And what's hilarious about that is if you talk to any indie publisher, they see it exactly different from that. I mean, they're it's like I am not in competition with Stephen King or James Rollins or anybody. I'm not in competition with them, because if you buy a Dan Brown book and my book is sitting right next to it, I did not lose a sale because of Dan Brown. There's no reason that same reader won't go read that Dan Brown book and then come back and pick my book up later. You know, there's no competition at all. There's competition for attention, which he who has the most money can usually win, but I don't even play that game. You know, I'm not running in the same circles as these guys. I have my 1,000 true fans, and that's really all I need to accomplish my dream. You know?
Yeah. There's an article in the New York Times, I think, how you can buy into the New York bestsellers list for like $200,000 or something.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And so, okay. And my question about that is, if it comes to a point where you can buy your way onto that list, then what is that list actually worth?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you for certain, if I had $200,000 to just throw at that list, and I bought in, at that point the list is completely worthless to everyone. Mm-hmm. I mean, if people can just spend money and be on it, then they're not really a bestseller. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Usually they're selling other services. They're like, especially in the nonfiction world. Yeah.
Right.
So what's the next Dan Kotler book coming out?
So that will be the Atlantis Riddle, which I have a confession. I'll tell your audience. This will be the first time I think I've told anyone this on air.
Ooh, sweet. It's an exclusive.
So this whole series started as kind of a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a joke, but a dare, right? Mm-hmm. So, but there are inside jokes in this whole thing. So here's a good one. Back before I took the dare, my friend Nick Thacker, so he's written a series of books and they're amazing. And if you are looking for thrillers, he's got some really great stuff. Look for the Enigma Strain. That's a great one. Amazon Code just came out. So there's my free plug for Nick. You're welcome, Nick. But he was invited by A.G. Riddle to write in the Kindle Worlds universe for his Atlantis Gene series. And so he wrote a book called The Atlantis Deception, which I read and edited and helped him get it ready to go. And so we were joking one day. I said, it'd be funny if I wrote we ought to write a book called The Atlantis Riddle, because A.G. Riddle writes those Atlantis books. Maybe we would cannibalize some of his sales, So that was the joke, right? And then I wrote, when he dared me to write my first thriller, I named it Coelho Medallion. I named it for Paulo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist.
Oh, okay.
And so it just because, I don't know, I more or less pulled it out of a hat, but I liked his work. He doesn't write thrillers. I didn't see any issue. And then this book, when I was thinking about a follow-up to it, I thought, well, now I can write Atlantis Riddle, because now it's the second book. It's not the first book, so I'm not really trying to pull anything here. But I always liked the title, So I named it that. So the inside joke is that it was kind of a gag, But then as I started kind of figuring out, well, what would be the Atlantis Riddle? What would be unique? I don't want to write the same. Every thriller author writes about Atlantis, about the Amazon, about Aztecs. These are things that keep coming back, right? So I wanted something unique, and so I've been playing around with some ideas, and I think I've got something that's going to be fairly cool. And I could not have written it. I could not have written this book the way it's going to be written if I hadn't first written Coelho Medallion. And so it's a nice little balance. So the next book is Coelho Medallion. There's another book, a novella tied to the series. It's a prequel called The Brass Hall, which is also available on Amazon. And people have loved that book. And I've already got ideas for more. Dan Kotler is going to be with me for a while, I think. He won't be exclusive. It's not the only character I'll write from now on, but he's going to be with me for a while.
All right, cool. And then the third one will be written on RV, right? So
yeah, exactly. And that was what I was going to point out, was that so far both books have author names as part of the title.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if I'll continue that. Maybe I will.
Yeah.
But maybe someday it'll be like I don't know, the Rollins syndrome or something.
The, the
Whatever.
King something.
King's Road.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, that is a good title. That Linus Riddle. That is a very good title. I like it.
yeah, actually, I think it's going to be very cool. And what's cool for me is I'm actually tying in a story, an apocryphal story about Thomas Edison's life. It's one of the opening scenes. I think it is the opening scene right now, unless I change things later, because there was an incident in which his laboratory in Orange County burned to the ground, and he's standing outside, and his son Charlie comes up to him and is expecting his father to be very morose about the whole thing, and his father's like, "Go get your mother. No one's ever going to see anything like this again. Go get her friends."
Yeah.
And so I included that scene, and I put a little twist on it, and made it part of the plot.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to say to the listeners before I let you go? Especially with the thunderstorms out there, you're gonna get that lightning strike.
I know. It's weird. Our weather's been really crazy for the past.
Yeah,
few
those floods in Houston, and hopefully, it's been kind of nuts.
Hopefully we don't get more of that. No, I guess we mentioned this earlier, but I mean, if anyone wants to just try my workout, you can do it for free. If you go to kevintumlinson.com/starter library, they'll let you get 3 of my books. You'll get on my mailing list. So if you're interested in thrillers, that's a good way to hear about the next one as soon as it's in pre-order. And you can check out Coelho Medallion online. I mean, it's kind of tapered off, but I mean, it hit number 1 for a while in its category, and then it's consistently stayed in the top 100 in that category, I think. So
yeah, that's great.
People are digging it. I mean, it's been my best-selling book. I mean,
I love the cover. The cover is awesome.
Thanks, man. I design all my own covers.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, you can do that as a side business. That's really nice.
I've kind of done that on the side for a few folks. I don't do it all the time, but yeah, I enjoy it. It's my way of finishing the book. Like it's graphic design was something I did as part of my business for a long time, and I've got some dog covers. I won't kid you. I mean, I had some pretty crappy covers on previous books for a while, but that one turned out great.
Wow, yeah, I'm jealous. You save the designer fees too.
It does save money. I kind of kill myself because I do all the jobs, but this is what I've always been, and it's hard for me to hand these things over to someone else. Yeah. I don't advise that for everyone, but I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Obviously, you have a talent because I could never come up with something like that.
Well, I'm glad you like it. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And if anyone ever wants to just chat with me, I'm very open about emails and that sort of thing. So hit the contact button on my website and say hello.
All right. Great. Thanks, Kevin.